I wanted to talk about Ben Simmons. One, I know some people are exhausted from it. I have many layers of takes here that I will try and make succinct. I don't like when people act like they're above the Ben Simmons thing to talk about it. I understand if you don't want it to dominate the NBA news cycle, but it's like a real thing that's happening. This is a wildly important player to what's supposed to be one of the best teams in the league, and it's turned into a shit show. That's headline news. Now, if you want to make fun of the reporting, I'm here for the jokes. I've made plenty of them on Twitter. It feels like both sides are handling this situation very poorly. The two things that I take issue with is, and they're on both sides of the fence, and maybe it's three things, because I think the overarching point is we need to be able to have like discussions where there's a gray area, that not everything is so cut and dry. The people that think they're somehow pro-labor by just taking Ben Simmons' side, I can't bring myself to understand that when you're talking about someone who is going to make nearly $150 million over the next 4 years. And this isn't a millionaire versus billionaire thing, because he's impacting other people on the team. It's not even just the highly paid front office guys. It's not just Embiid, but it's like lower level guys on the team, lower level guys within this organization. If this blows up in the Sixers' face, there are going to be people that lose their jobs. Like there's a trickle down effect to this. I'm not looking at Ben Simmons, who is rich and has the flexibility to do what he wants, as me being pro-labor. When we were talking about the middle of the pandemic and NBA teams were saying, oh, we'll match whatever our players raise. Like, yes, you want to go that route where these teams are worth billions and billions of dollars, and they're putting the onus on the millionaire players to go out and have an impact on the community first before they do anything. I'm totally with you. The other thing, and this is from someone who thinks that Ben Simmons has handled this situation less than ideally, we got to be more sensitive to mental well-being here. We can't just automatically assume that he is faking a mental health issue here. I, for one, look, if you think that this is a ruse, and I hope it's not, I hope the thing that he's not mentally ready to play is not a ruse. But if you think it's a ruse, I kind of understand that based off how everything has unfolded to this point. That's not what you can make a joke about. Like, you want to talk about the report that came out that his camp thinks that the Sixers were too good for him to develop. Yes, that is fucking stupid. That is one of the dumbest things I have ever heard. But like, this is someone who, regardless of if you think that he's not willing to improve, that's a different discussion. But if someone is going to say that they're not mentally ready to do something after they just went through this entire process, where I have to imagine, like, this isn't just a unilateral Ben Simmons decision. He has people in his ear, Rich Paul or whoever else is at Clutch Sports. Like, do we think it was Ben Simmons' decision alone to hold out or then to show up? No, there are people in his ear. This is still a very young kid who, again, even if you don't think he's right in this situation, I would argue no one's right at this point, because the Sixers overplayed their hand. Whatever Doc Rivers wants to claim, he was misquoted, even though you look at that after the Game 7 verbatim, him basically saying, I don't know if Ben sucks or not, is essentially what it amounted to. No one has handled this situation properly, but we can't jump to this conclusion that he's just faking not being mentally ready. I could see, after everything he's gone through, after all the voices that we know are in his ear, having to go back to an organization that, James Harden trade aside, yes, this is why you get paid all this money in the NBA, is to be a part of those transactions. I know people like to think that they're above transactions now too. I understand that it can take focus away from the actual game. I totally get that. I want to talk about basketball just as much as the next person. I also appreciate transactions. I also appreciate the human element behind them now more so than I ever had. There's a balance there. But part of the reason you're getting paid all this money is because your name is going to be thrown. And that's part of the MO. That being said, there's a difference between being involved in James Harden rumors and then just knowing that your team wants to get rid of you, which is where I think Ben Simmons has been for quite some time, at least since the end of last season. So you're dealing with that, showing up to a team that you don't think actually wants you long term. Now, maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you're fed up with your teammates because Joel Embiid, and look, Joel Embiid's response to when the report came out that Ben Simmons doesn't think they're a good fit or whatever, I don't think that was Ben Simmons that leaked that himself. And we got to stop calling them leaks. But like, there's so many people involved in that decision-making part of the process. You're now going back to a team where it's hard to own up and say, maybe I went about this the wrong way. Or you're facing all these guys who know you don't want to be there. Or you're facing these guys for the first time after you made what they deemed this mission critical season ending mistake against Atlanta. And look, newsflash, terrible decision by Ben in the moment. I will argue until the end of time, there's never one reason any team lost a game. One play does not decide an entire game. I still think that the criticism is fair game there, but there are issues like the Sixers had opportunities aside from that moment to win the series, to get back in that game specifically. I understand being frustrated with Ben Simmons. I understand, and I think you should be frustrated with him and the Sixers, but the mental health stuff is where I draw the line with thinking he's faking it or making jokes about that. And my final point, this is a little bit longer than I want it to be, is I could see him not wanting to face the Philly fans. And I'm not calling out the Sixers fan base. They are one of the most loyal, enthusiastic fan bases in the NBA, but they're probably one of the more, you want to call them honest or brutal, however you want to put it. Now you have to go to home games, if they even play them in home games at this point, and face them where they're probably going to boo you. And they're not out there booing Daryl Morey for his role in this. They're not out there booing the Sixers because they failed to trade for James Harden or because they failed to find a package for Ben Simmons yet. I think most fans have been pretty pro. NBA Twitter seems to lean more towards Simmons, and then actual fans of the game or the Sixers seem to be more pro, like, what the fuck, the Sixers are doing everything right, just based off what I've seen in my mentions. It just makes me, wherever you fall in that, it makes me uncomfortable that we're okay still in this climate. And not that we ever should have been, but as this has become more of a focus, more of a revelation at how important mental health is, especially for these athletes who are just so exposed. I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that we can jump to jokes or to the conclusion that he's faking it, when I think there are legitimate, authentic, genuine reasons why he might not be mentally ready to play right now. And this is me talking from my perspective, where I don't know that I could play in this situation. So I'm not trying to project that onto him. I just see a scenario in which this is a real thing that he is struggling with.
I had no idea where you were going to take this, because with the topic of Ben Simmons, there are a bajillion directions that you can go right now, because so much is in flux. And then you basically stole all of my talking points. So I agree wholeheartedly. I was very uncomfortable when people were making jokes about the back injury. Maybe air quotes around the back injury, because we don't really know. But, if it's a real injury, which it very well could be given his history with injuries, that's a bad look. And then the poking fun at the mental health stuff is an even bigger deal to me. And regardless of how that would have developed, if it does exist, it's at least in some part self-inflicted, because he has, put himself in this situation by refusing to find any compromise, to play the style of basketball that people have wanted, the lack of development, maybe the lack of work on his game, all of that. But it doesn't even matter, because self-inflicted or not, this is still a young human being who has had to deal with all sorts of vitriol just heaped upon his shoulders for months on end. The subject of constant jokes, of constant scrutiny, of constant criticism. That's going to take its toll, regardless of whether you're the one who caused it or not. So yeah, of course he might not be mentally ready to play right now. And it's so easy to make the jokes. And I get the urges, because we all have to fight those back, to be honest. I mean, this situation has devolved so much that that is a natural instinct to poke fun at the situation. But I think it's just important to take that step back and recognize all of the factors that led us to get to this point, and then just have a little bit more grace than we like to on Twitter.
Yeah, and look, I have made jokes about it, and I guess I can admit to being a hypocrite. I had a tweet I did, I muted it. It was did a 1,500. It went viral. Is that what it's called? Viral, where I had Ben Simmons and the Sixers handling the situation. They're both on bikes. They stick sticks in the spokes of their bikes, and they both fall off. That is if you want to say that that's wrong and that I'm being a hypocrite for that, that's fine. But it's I'm poking fun at the general situation, which
right,
to some extent is comical. And I think, again, the criticism of how both sides have handled it as fair game, the mental health stuff specifically just makes me wildly uncomfortable. And you don't think, the other thing is the Sixers are still allowing him to be away from the team now through this. They seem to be taking it more seriously, unless this is a facade, which when it just comes to someone's mental health, I'm not going to claim that it is, but like they seem to understand. Like Joel Embiid, even people were making fun that he slipped it into the crowd before the Sixers' first home game. Like Ben is still our brother, but it seems like the team is now understanding that maybe there is this immense pressure on Ben Simmons, or that he really is in a not the best state of mind right now. If they can understand it, like we need to be able to understand it too. And like that's where I understand Twitter's not the place for nuance, and I totally get that. I accept that. There are elements of me that embrace that. But like we got that stuff is just so wildly uncomfortable and just bad,
Mhm.
bad faith.